Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really wild story. It's got assassination, legal battles, and one journalist taking on a multi-billion-dollar gambling empire, one that was built entirely on secrecy. This is the story of the Cramm affair.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The big question here is, how did this tiny Caribbean island become this, secretive, unregulated hub for thousands of online casinos all over the world? Well, it all boils down to a system that let countless online casinos slap a Curaçao license on their site, but with, get this, almost zero real government oversight. And you have to understand, this wasn't some kind of accident. It wasn't a mistake. This system was built for opacity. It was designed from the ground up to be a black box. It was like a legal shield, right? It let these operators plug into the global financial system, but no one, not the public, not even the government itself, could really see who they were or what they were doing.
So to really get a feel for the stakes here, what it meant to even think about challenging the system, we have to start with a crime that just shook the entire island. Our story doesn't begin with a legal document, no. It begins with a murder on a beach.
So this man, Helman Wheels, he was this incredibly popular politician. I mean, he just won an election running on this powerful anti-corruption platform. He was a genuine threat to the old guard, the establishment. And just days before he was killed, he was on the radio, literally waving a file in the air, promising to blow the lid off what he called the gambling mafia and all its ties to financial crime.
And then, on May 5, 2013, he was shot 5 times in broad daylight on a public beach. The way it was done, so openly, it wasn't just a murder. It was a message. A very loud, very terrifying warning to anyone else who even thought about challenging the system.
So the investigation, which they codenamed Maximus, started digging. And what they found, it was just staggering. They traced the hitman, a gang member called Monster, back through a middleman, a broker, all the way to the people who ordered the hit. And who were they? You're not going to believe this. The former Minister of Finance, George Jamaluddin, and his half-brother, a lottery tycoon. The motive was just crystal clear. They had to shut Wheels up before he could tear down their entire world.
So you have this climate of absolute fear, right? Speaking out against corruption could literally get you killed. But into that vacuum, someone else stepped up. Someone decided to continue the fight that Helman Wheels had started. And her name is Nardi Cramm.
Now, Nardi Cramm wasn't your typical journalist. She actually had a background in IT and in law. Think about that. It's the perfect skill set for digging into the murky world of offshore companies and online gambling. She took this small blog, the Knipselkrant Curaçao, or KKC for short, and basically turned it into this investigative powerhouse aimed right at the heart of the island's hidden economies.
And her strategy was just brilliant. It was like a two-pronged attack. Think of it like an air war and a ground war. The air war was her blog, the KKHC. That's where she exposed the corruption, got the story out there, shaped public opinion. But then she started the ground war. She created a foundation, SBGOK, that would file lawsuits on behalf of players who got ripped off. The goal? To bankrupt these shady operators, to hit them right where it hurts, in the wallet.
So, with this two-front war, she honed in on her main target, the entire structure of Curaçao's gambling licensing system, a system that she started calling out for what she believed it was, completely illegal, a total sham.
Okay, so how did this illegal sham actually work? It was pretty simple, really. The government would grant a few master licenses to a handful of private companies. And then, these master license holders would turn around and sell sub-licenses to literally anyone, anywhere in the world. Unlimited numbers of them, with pretty much zero supervision. It created this total regulatory black hole. The government itself had no clue who was operating under its own flag.
And, well, the fallout from a system designed for secrecy was pretty much exactly what you'd expect. It turned into a massive hub for international money laundering. There were proven links to organized crime. Players who got cheated out of their money, they had absolutely no recourse. And of course, Curaçao's international reputation was just trashed. Its licensed casinos were being blacklisted all across Europe.
Now, here's the thing. Cramm's big claim that this whole system was a sham wasn't just her opinion. This is a crucial point. After all her reporting, the courts actually agreed with her. The Joint Court of Justice came out and said the term sublicense was, and I quote, misleading. It confirmed that these master license holders weren't really monitoring anyone. The whole thing was just a front.
So you can imagine when you're trying to expose a multi-billion-dollar system, people are going to fight back. And since violence didn't work to silence the message that Wheel started, the industry turned to a new weapon to shut down Nardi Cramm. They decided to use the law itself.
And they did this by burying her in lawsuits, specifically something called SLAP suits. That stands for Strategic Lawsuit Against Public Participation. And here's the key. These lawsuits aren't meant to be won. The goal is just to overwhelm you, to intimidate you, to bleed you dry with legal costs, until you just give up and shut up. It's basically weaponizing the court system to silence your critics.
So her legal battle was this total roller coaster. At first, she actually lost. A lower court ruled against her. But she didn't back down. She appealed. And in October 2022, the appeals court gave her this massive landmark victory. A year later, in November 2023, the Dutch Supreme Court hammered the final nail in the coffin, dismissing the industry's last appeal. She had won. And that ruling, it was huge. Not just for her, but for press freedom everywhere. The court basically said, look, she's a public watchdog. And it went even further, saying that activist journalists who are trying to expose wrongdoing should be given some room to exaggerate and provoke. It was a powerful defense of the kind of tough, in-your-face journalism that's sometimes necessary to hold powerful people accountable.
But here's where it gets complicated. A real legal paradox. While she's winning this huge civil case protecting her right to report, in a separate criminal case, she was actually convicted of slander and libel for doing pretty much the same kind of reporting. It's a bizarre contradiction that just goes to show how this fight is still very much ongoing. She's appealing that conviction, of course, but it really shines a light on the kind of threats journalists are still up against.
So there's no doubt that Cramm's work, both her reporting and her court battles, forced some massive, revolutionary changes. But you know, a revolution is one thing. What comes after is often an even bigger struggle.
Because of all this pressure, Curaçao passed a brand new law, the LOK. It gets rid of that whole sublicense system completely and sets up a new government regulator. On paper, it's a total victory. It's everything the reformers fought for. But in reality, well, the ink on that law is barely dry, and there are already new allegations of corruption swirling around, targeting the very people who were supposed to be in charge of cleaning things up. So when you step back and look at the legacy of this whole affair, what are the takeaways? Well, first, it proves that one person, one really determined person, can challenge a corrupt and powerful system. But it also teaches us a hard lesson, that just changing the laws isn't enough if that deeper political culture of corruption doesn't change with it. And maybe most importantly, it shows us how the tactics for silencing people have evolved, from bullets to lawsuits. And that really leaves us with this final critical question to think about. When corruption stops using bullets and starts using lawsuits, when the tactics to suppress the truth get more sophisticated and wrap themselves in the language of the law, how does journalism evolve to fight back? How do we make sure the truth can still win?